Which part of town are you in?
Like we're almost next door neighbors because we're over Victory and Eagle.
I love it because our podcast is next door neighbors.
Oh,
I know.
Good plug. Good plug, Monty.
It's like you knew.
It's like you knew.
Right.
How long you been in Treasure Valley?
About 16 years.
16.
Yep.
Oh.
So Monty owns, he's a franchise owner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of Woodcraft.
Woodcraft, yeah, I know that.
Which is a specialty fine, am I correct? Fine woodworking, a specialty shop?
Yeah. I mean, it's not even necessarily fine woodworking, but I mean, just like woodworking.
Woodworking.
You know?
I've been in there. I bought
Stain.
by myself.
By
I bought
yourself.
stain. Gel stain.
Good. Gel stains are popular. Yeah.
One thing that we always argue about, we don't argue about design too much, but we argue always about stain because
Stain is a
I think gals, ever since I even started building, they have this, I guess, perception of what the project will look like based off of like things they'll see at World Market or West Elm, whatnot.
It's like this specific color of wood that looks like it's stained, but he said they paint it.
I imagine they paint it. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but like I have yet to recreate a stain that she likes, and
I'll show him a picture always. I'm like, "Can you do this?" And he's like, "I'm gonna try, but it's not gonna look like that."
Yeah, it's like a total art and a science,
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, I need a stain to match this aesthetic, and you're like,
Yeah.
I don't even know what that word means. What is
Yeah.
the
But what's funny is that you can go buy a piece of furniture. That's furniture is it's too big of a word. I mean, it's too prestigious of a word because it's particle wood. You know,
Yeah,
stuff
sure,
like that.
yeah.
But it has this like perfect whitewashing gray with a hint of brown and like a little bit of colonial, a little bit of gray.
I
in
mean,
there.
they know what they're doing.
And it's like that has to be a paint, correct?
Well, it's probably like a little like a glaze, like they do an undercoat, and then they do like the white over the top or something, and then
Interesting.
Yeah.
you know, and then
How
wipe
would you
it back.
So you're saying you would probably use like an HVLP sprayer with like a base coat, which would be like gray.
Yeah.
And then you would let that dry.
Yep.
And then come back again after it's all dry with a like a tannish kind of color.
Yeah, or you'd wipe the tan on. You know what I mean? So you'd wipe it on and then just let whatever gets into the wood pores just kind of stay there.
Interesting.
Have you ever done that?
I've never done that.
And then you put like clear over the top and it's all good.
The only thing I've done that's remotely close is when she's not happy with the project, I would lightly sand it to like maybe 220 and then give it another wipe of something else.
Yeah.
Just to
Mix it in.
amber.
Yeah.
It's always the project is always amber in her perspective. You know what I mean?
Okay.
For some reason, all the wood you choose pulls really orange, and I don't like that orangey look.
Yeah, that's the orange side of amber, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you want the reds and the yellows, but not too much red, not too
Just
much
a
yellow
little bit
either.
of a gray in there just to make it like cooler. Oh,
Well,
it's
that's
so
the
hard
thing
to
is,
achieve it.
I think you're agreeing with him on false pretenses because he said yellows and reds, and that's not the direction you're going. You're going towards
bit.
right,
Yeah.
but you don't
no,
know.
Amber, you can go so much in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
you
It's
know?
so hard.
Yeah.
So here's a prime example. So we have those 10-foot tall sliding barn doors that I built, and they were made, and that was a big lesson for me, but I made them out of a redwood. No, sorry, not a redwood. It was Douglas fir.
Okay.
Which has a little bit of that pinkish pigment in them.
Yeah.
And she had maybe 2 or 3 stains that were always like approved. So I always knew that I don't have
Our
to get
go-tos.
a second, second
But
opinion.
you usually used what?
Fruit wood from Minwax.
But like on what species of wood did you use
maple
it on?
plywood for cabinets.
Okay, so
I've
it's
done
different.
it. I've done weathered oak on an ash. You like that? Fruit wood on ash as well. So then I started finding out that white oak and ash were 2 of her favorite wood species that were kind of almost like forgiving, I guess. Right? Am I correct?
Yeah, there's not too much other colors to compete with.
Correct,
Yeah, I
right.
mean, they're kind of tan and they're kind of cream. you
And
know?
there have pores in there that give it a little texture as
Yep.
opposed to pine wood nor maple.
Yep.
And so she had this color that she already approved, so I threw it on, and personally I liked it. I was like, this is really nice. She came home and she
Did
goes,
not like it.
and this is caught on camera. She goes, so when are you gonna stain it? And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Well, first of all,
done.
Did you do one coat of stain?
I did one coat.
Okay, it didn't look stained at all. It's because it's so what's the word? Knotty, maybe, right? Like the wood, Douglas fir.
He's more of an expert.
Well,
in this than
sometimes
I
like
am.
it won't even penetrate in Douglas fir sometimes because
That's
it's so
exactly
like
it. The
sappy,
densities?
you know.
Oh.
Yeah, it's got stuff in it. You
That's
know?
exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I was like, it doesn't look like you stained at
Yeah, it's like
all.
you wipe it on and wipe it right off.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I was like,
Interesting.
see?
So it's a glazing of sap that's already on it, like a coating?
Yeah, it's a glazing of sap, and then I don't know what they do in the milling process, but like there's that kind of like shiny part, of the board.
I know exactly.
right?
It's like
And so it's almost like you have to cut that off in order for it to like really do anything.
Seep
and then,
in. Yeah. Interesting. So maybe that's why I was like,
That
this
it's
doesn't look like a
kind of
stain.
red too. And
It
so
was
if you pick a
very
stain,
red.
then it's just gonna like accentuate that red.
Yes, and exactly it's what it did.
I remember
That's what it
going
did.
to like my hair person, and we were talking about the color wheel because she was talking about stain and paint and all that. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like you're probably an expert at coloring stuff.
Oh, she could match the
And
paint color for color.
so she drew it out on a little piece of paper, and she's like, okay, you got your red over here, you've got your blue over here, yellow, and then you go the opposite way. And I'm like, oh wow. Anyways, it made perfect sense at the time. I've totally forgotten it, but
Was it logical? Like, was it an equation
it's-
or is
Yeah,
it a feel?
it was. It was like there's a color wheel, and you have like your primary colors on there, and then like your secondary colors, which are the blending of those primary colors. And so like if you want to get opposite of red, you would probably go to like green to get the opposite of red, because that would be like the yellow and
'cause
blue
it's opposing
mixed
to-
up.
oh,
It's like the
interesting.
opposing part. So if you want to take away a certain color and mute it, then you'd go a little bit more green. I'm not talking like a lot of green, but like
Sure.
there'd just be a little bit more green.
bit.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense, because whenever you'll go to like Lowe's or Home Depot and you get a bucket of paint, that's always, when you open it, it's like a hyper white, and you're like, turn this into a ripe olive color for a wall room, and they always just put a couple little splatters of not even ripe olive, but like
It's like black.
It's a black,
yeah.
and then they'll mix it, and you're like, oh wow, that's like magic that just happened right in front of me.
Yep. And so, yeah, wood is weird because it's always got the underlying color that you're contending with all
Right.
the time. But,
Huh.
Yeah.
Do you
Maybe
find
we should have
consulted with him?
like researched this before we had so many hiccups along the way.
Well, it's like trial and error too,
Yeah, it
right?
is.
I mean,
Right.
you've got, you got to try it out, and you go, no, that was terrible.
What's your perspective on gel stains? Is it more forgiving or is it more problematic?
Definitely more forgiving. It doesn't penetrate as deep in the wood. It's a little bit like, it's not like a paint, but it's a little bit like a paint because it kind of lays right on top. And it's got a little bit of a finish in it, which is why it lays on top. So it's super forgiving. It's like it's like the consistency of pudding.
Yeah.
And so, vertical surfaces, it's really easy to control. And you can wipe a ton on, you
got
can
less
leave
of
it.
that like runny.
Yeah, you don't have the
Yeah.
runny drips and all that kind of stuff.
Now, what do you do to battle? Now, my experience with it's very minimal. I'm trying to actually expand into the general finishes more often. And probably my first or second scenario using it was on the barn doors when she finally bought it. But I found that wiping it on sometimes, if it's a little bit too warm outside, you start getting not blotchiness, but like almost tackiness.
Yeah, so it's like starting to dry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that finish in it is starting to congeal or or just
quick.
harden a little bit, and so that's when it's more like a paint, than it is.
So
a
you
stain.
speed up the process. That's all you got to do.
Yeah, with all stain, you want to kind of kit it wet and keep it wet for a long, long time, and then wipe off whatever you don't want to leave there. And then, wait till, if you want it darker, you just wait till it's dry, and then you do that whole process again, and it'll lay down a little bit more pigment every time.
Oh, interesting. A little bit goes a long way. Wow. How did you get into? Were you around fine woodworking as a kid, or what was the story there?
Oh my goodness, this is a long story, but I'll try to make it short. So my dad was. They're picking up their coffee cups right now. They're like, okay, let's sit back.
We love stories. Here.
Story time, And I've told this story to almost everybody, and they've just fallen asleep halfway through. No, I'm kidding. My dad was a shop teacher, and
a high school shop.
Like
teacher?
a high school, they called it industrial arts at the time, and so it was junior high school, and in the summertime, he would like build furniture for the house. And so my job was to come in and clean the shop and also sand all of his projects. And so I just got familiar with the tools. I did some turning on a lathe. I'd watch him do stuff, but I was always find myself sanding projects. So I hated woodworking. I didn't take it in junior high. I didn't take it in high school. I didn't do any of that stuff. And then it wasn't until I had 4 boys of my own and I wanted to build them a bookshelf. So I went to Home Depot, bought a table saw, went to Rockler, bought some other stuff. And
was there a Rockler in town?
So we were living in Southern California at the time.
Okay.
And so we went in there and I bought a couple tools. And the moment that I put that that piece of plywood for the bookshelf across the table saw and I smelled the sawdust, it was like it went back to like
Nostalgia.
I was 9 years old,
Yeah.
and it was really familiar.
Did you have a really good relationship with your father?
I did, and so I follow him around and like I say, sand all the projects, which I absolutely hated, but it was great. It was great memories. I mean, it was awesome memories. Because even part of woodworking too, it like comes back to you. If you've gone away from it for a long time.
Right.
And so I had that moment where it was just totally familiar. I took it up as a hobby. I had a job at the time. I was working at Costco wholesale, and I was traveling around a lot, and which was kind of a bummer. And so I was kind of going, oh man, it'd be really great to kind of stay at home, but that just was not in my career path. So I was thumbing through Fine Woodworking magazine, and there was an ad for Woodcraft, and it's like, make your hobby your career. And so it was something that was super attractive. I thought it was cool. We checked it out.
And what year is this?
This is 2005.
Okay.
Yep. And we saw that they had some places in Southern California that they wanted to open, but they had one in Boise, Idaho, and it was already here. It was run by the company, and I think that they were just wanting to sell it. It was 2,000 miles away from the corporate office, and so we took a look at it. My family, my wife's family lives here, and so we were like, you know what, let's try it out. So we bought it. And
now you don't have to disclose any numbers, but buying into a franchise is a pretty significant chunk of change?
Yeah, it was. Now they were really motivated to sell it, so I really feel like we got a really good deal on it. And there wasn't a lot of inventory, not a lot of assets, so it was one of those things that was not easy to do, but it wasn't like out of the realm of possibility. And so we bought it on Valentine's Day. I went to Costco. I know, right?
Honey, I bought you a
bunch of tools. And we went to Seattle the next day and gave my notice, and they were like, "What are you thinking?" And
were you in Kirkland, Seattle?
So we started off in Kirkland, working up there, and then we moved to Dallas and moved to Southern California, and
then moved back.
Then came back up here. You
Yeah.
know? And so we gave our notice, and it was kind of weird because I'd always been like at a big company, and this was not a big company. This was like really small business, and it was great. It was awesome. So anyways, that's how we got into it. So at that point, being the owner of a new store, you were expected to know everything that was about woodworking. And I had just taken it up as a hobby, so it was like ramp up on the.
How old were you when you took the leap of faith?
I was probably 34, 35, something like that.
34, 35.
Yeah.
Had you already visited here before?
Yeah. So my in-laws were living here, and so we'd come up here to go skiing.
Yeah. So you kind of were a little familiar.
Yeah. And there was no way that you could live in Boise and go, flying all around the country and all that, at the time. I mean, it was like, it was totally different now, right? Probably great now, just, we don't care where you live, just as long as you're going to work. But, there was this deal, you had to be in the office every day. And
that's changing even more and more now, especially after this whole pandemic thing.
Oh my goodness.
I can't tell you how many conference calls I'll get on during the week, and you'll see somebody's back of their living room, and I'm like, oh, you don't go in the office at all. I have YouTube partners, managers at their headquarters, and then Facebook. And then here these people are supposed to connect with creators like myself to tell us how to be better at what we do. And it's you see their TVs on in the background, the ceiling fans spinning.
Around,
You're like, you're not as cool as I thought you were.
You're not as professional as I thought. Google was a huge corporate place.
I know. Hilarious. Well, I remember the day, you'd go to the news station, and the newscasters would be dressed really, really nice from the waist up, and then the waist down. It was nothing. It's the mullet of business, you know.
Yeah.
I'm
exactly.
sure.
What was how did COVID affect you guys?
Wow, it was hard. I mean, the news of it was so jarring, to say hey, we're going to lock down and we're going to close everything up. And unless you're, an essential business, you're done for a while. And that was really rough. And so I remember, it's remembering these major tragic events in your life. Where were you during 9/11? I was in my living room when we got the news that everything was shutting down. And, fortunately I was confident that we were an essential business only because we were hardware, like a hardware store.
Yeah.
Right.
And so there were some things that, that were reasonably essential. Although, I mean, it's like a candy store more than it is a hardware store. But we shut our doors, and
how long is that for?
We shut our doors for about 6 weeks, and we did the lemonade stand where we had a table up at the front of the store, and we would go out in front, meet a customer, and they're like, hey, I need some glue. We'd go back, get the glue, and they're like, no, the blue glue. Okay, then we'd run back and go get it, and it was super fun because you got your steps in, and on the silver lining part of it, there were still people that were engaged. There were still people that were coming by and supporting us, and we were playing music inside because we didn't have any customers. We were eating Jimmy John's every day, and it was kind of a fun foxhole moment, but that was a tough time. The blessings of it were I got really good at pickleball because when we closed, we just kept our bubble really, really tight. We played in our driveway, and we were done at 5 o'clock. We weren't open till our regular hours, But then after about 6 weeks, we opened back up, and it was just busy. People were at home, right?
Yeah. They were ready.
And they were ready to go do stuff, and we were ready for them. And so business actually, for us, it was really, really great. as long as we could keep in stock on things and all that. But, we were really fortunate. I'm so glad that, during that time, because I know that there's a lot of businesses out there that really, impacted big time. And still, for that matter, like restaurants,
right.
What a tough roller coaster that is.
And not to mention I've recently, because I've been, again, during the pandemic, I'd listened to all these like interviews and different restaurant owners and how that's going and what they're doing to like adapt, kind of like you guys did. And like I found out like what the profit margins of restaurants are.
It's really low.
It's
really low.
It's the lowest.
Yeah.
It's the lowest. And so like, to shut it down for a couple of weeks, you're like, well, there you go. You're done.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you can have half capacity.
No.
And do it really well.
No.
You've got to really run a lot of.
It's like a 4% profit margin. You know what I mean? In order to get out of that.
Yeah.
Who? Because I've actually never spoken to a business owner that provided. Or that took care of so many customers. So how do you find out if you're an essential worker? Do you get an email? Do you get?
There's a list, right? And so on these proclamations that we read, from the state and from the city, there's a list of essential businesses, and you would take whatever your business code is, and it would tell you that you're a hardware store, and you're like, okay, we're okay.
Okay.
Now, I mean, that being said, there wasn't a whole lot of enforcement, around here,
Right.
which was fine. But yeah, there was like a real list. These guys can do business and these folks can't.
And it's not necessarily like, how do you describe your business? Like people would ask me like, what's my business? Like, well, the easier answer is like YouTuber, but then because it crosses so many platforms, you're like, well, content creator. And then after that, when you like, we meet with our like financial planner, and he's like, what are you? I was like you hit that little drop down menu.
Yeah.
And you're
There's
like,
nothing
you're
that
a
you can-
contractor, a nurse, a doctor.
You're like, no, wait a minute, I think I'm service.
Your
I'm a
news,
service industry.
news or media. You're like, I don't know. I'm like a quarter of that and an eighth of this.
Yeah, and I think that's probably true.
Right.
I mean, I think that's.
I feel like because also it was like kind of uncharted territory. There was so much gray area that people were able to work with when it came to like essential businesses and staying open and a lot of those things.
What? So once things started opening up even more, and you could have now general public in your stores, and I know now in your store is like in Boise, which is a little bit more. What's the best way? Like a little more like liberal or a little bit more. Anywho. As opposed to we're in Meridian, and it's a little bit more relaxed on that perspective. So when they had those mandates of, let's say, masks, and we live in a great state, but certain businesses had to enforce wearing masks. What were the? Because I saw the levels of enforcements, right? There were levels of enforcements for the most part was just like, here's a sign outside the door. Most people kind of cater to it, but let's say there was this period where. I think business owners were held really liable, like if somebody didn't. Yeah,
I mean, it was actually really kind of scary. I mean, it was an unfair position because I mean, we were meant to be like the police officers, or like the enforcement of whatever the rule was.
Yeah,
and that put us in a really tough position because I mean, most of the time, if you're a restaurant or you're any kind of business and you're inviting the public in, I mean, you're there to serve them, right? And you're there to meet their every whim, their every need, and at this point we're like, hey, listen, there's a key that you have and it's called wearing a mask, and you can't come in and we can't be nice to you unless you wear one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was just put you in kind of like a loggerheads with your customers. And, so what I always love to do is I like to, we do retail, we sell and stuff like that. But really, if you are in the service business, you really got to like people or you should really get out.
Yeah.
Totally. And you got to like people who are likable, and you got to like people who are not necessarily likable either. And so what I wanted to do was just take a step back and say, okay, here's what's really important here, because I don't really feel like at the time, there was a whole lot of truth out there with respect to why you should wear it. What is this all about? Is this some vast government conspiracy, or is this just, what is it?
A lot of division. Yeah.
And I wasn't really getting the truth from anybody. So I was like, okay, fine. What is the truth, in our situation? And really it's like, it's an extension of who we are, and that's customer service, right? We're there to serve people. And, before we got people back into work, so like our staff, we had to make sure that they felt safe to come to work. Well, those rules are different for everybody. Some people are safe if you have the radioactive suit on. Some people are safe if you don't wear a mask at all. And so you have to kind of meet it at the lowest common denominator. So we wore suits for a while. No, I'm kidding. We didn't. We just wore masks. And,
Breaking Bad.
Right? Yeah. And so it was the same thing for the customers too. It's almost like we had to kind of operate at the lowest common denominator. And so, for the most part, people, and I was begrudgingly too, because I mean, the hair on the end of my nose, like that really fuzzy stuff right there, it's like, I don't think it's ever going to grow back. Because those masks are like just so abrasive, right?
Oh, for sure.
And it was a total bummer wearing that stuff. But at the same time, if it meant, making people feel comfortable, we were all about it. And then again, like the whole obeying the law thing too is kind of a big deal, especially the penalties that they were saying that they were going to have were pretty strong.
Was there enforcement on the government's perspective?
I don't know that there was any enforcement, but there was certainly the penalty there, which kind of gave you a little bit of fear. It's like, okay, so if you break the rules, it was the threat of it. If you break the rules, we're going to shut you down for 10 days for your first warning.
So that was my question is like, so the first warning is 10 days. Was there a monetary fine? Because I heard business be fined, but I didn't know what the dollar amount was.
I think it was really just, closing down for business. So like the first one was like 10 days, second one was like 30 days, and the third one was you lose your business license. You couldn't do business anymore.
Yikes.
And that's monetary, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit, I was like, okay, well, who's going to enforce it? I mean, are the police going to come by and watch this?
Right.
Or like, is there going to be like some kind of community group that all of a sudden feels
citizens
citizens are pitchforks and torches, and fortunately it wasn't that deal, so it was kind of a self-enforcement thing, which I was really happy about because then it let everybody just do the right thing. It gave you the open to do that, and so we did, and every now and then there was somebody that didn't really like it and yelled at you for it, and you get them out the door as fast as you can. Really, that's the way it is. But that doesn't happen too much at Woodcraft. People come in.
You have your regulars too, right?
Yeah, they want to be there.
Yeah.
And sometimes the regulars were like, "You're really going to make me wear one of these?" I'm like, I know. Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
I am.
That's so tough. And
will you do it for me?
Yeah.
I know.
Well, you have a very interesting relationship with your customers, and you don't see that too often. Like, I mean, maybe you'll see it from this like mom and pop pasta that's like hand tossed, and there's 4 tables, and like, no, you got to try Luigi's pizza. This is Luigi. But you're like one of the few people who are like, you're front and center all the time. Your office is right by the front door. Like sometimes your door's open, like you could see you doing accounting or something like that, paying your bills.
I'm playing Angry Birds. But.
Well, perception's everything, right?
Is that still around? I'm not playing Angry Birds. That was the thing.
That's a great question for our kids because they're the ones they're more hip than we are. So like Minecraft is in right now and Fortnite right now. I don't know about it.
No, Minecraft. Do you guys like Minecraft? I hate it.
I
lived through the 80s to get out of that pixelated.
Oh, I know. Now it's like trendy.
Yes.
Weird.
It makes no sense.
I don't get it either.
We were always very hesitant about raising our kids with video games because my you're a dad of 4, 5? 5. Yeah. You're a dad of 5 and a grandfather, by the way, for the first time.
Yes.
We'll talk.
Thanks for bringing it up. Thanks for the plug.
Yeah. We'll bring it up here in a second. But I didn't really get into video games. My oldest brother did, and he was successful in life and fine. I didn't control him. But like we kind of tested it with our oldest boy, Jack, and we noticed that video games affected him a little too much. He was just irritable.
His personality, his what is it? Not personality, but just his day-to-day, like, I can't think of it.
He was just not a good listener after that.
It would affect him too much.
Cheeks would get red. He gets irritable and stuff like that. We're like, dude, this is not for you. Like, you're too much on edge. And so he got a little bit older. So we finally kind of made this rule. It was like, okay, only on the weekends. And I don't know where I was going with the story. But long story short, they're only allowed to play it on the weekends. But as far as Minecraft, we finally realized he's 8 now. And so we saw that, because he only plays it on the weekends, if you really want to punish him, you take away his freedom, which is his games. Yeah. And he wears a mask during the day at home. Oh, not but
that's one of the rules.
He really kind of evolved and realized, like, I was teaching him, like, things don't control you. And so, like, he kind of figured out through it. But I was talking to a couple of my buddies that are, like, Microsoft engineers in Seattle. I still have, like, a group of, like, 7 guys that are really close. And they were telling me how for kids, it's actually pretty beneficial to play like Minecraft because it kind of develops that engineering perspective. It's for us. Do you remember before Legos? Because I remember we had, what are they called? These links, these metal links that you would put together to create.
Like blob blocks or.
Log blocks. Kyle, do you know what I'm talking about?
The metal ones? I don't remember metal ones.
From the Sandlot where they like build the metal.
Yeah, those were probably.
From Russia.
We had some weird
toys.
Here's some mortar and a shovel.
There was like Lincoln logs.
They were not Lincoln logs, but there were these metal links with nuts and screws. You put them together and you make a crane.
Almost like the Connects.
Kind of like a Connects. Yeah, and so it definitely, then Legos came in, and so you were challenged to, build a house, make a weapon, whatever. Yeah. And so essentially what my buddies are explaining to me is like, Minecraft is that, but in a little bit more of a digital age.
Yeah. Right. Because they do create It's a lot of like creating.
Now I don't think there's any benefits with like Fortnite and all that.
But I mean,
No.
couldn't they make it look better though?
I know.
Oh
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
It's,
Let's give it to like 1080p at least.
Yeah, right. You know, I mean,
It's so funny. I remember when I first.
I'd be all in.
Yeah.
But you know, maybe it wouldn't be so cool.
So is it almost like ironic? You know how like a
It is. I think it is.
like a 19-year-old kid
Yeah.
grows a 70s mustache like
Well,
a Ron Burgundy?
Okay, so you know, every 30 years, fashion like recycles, right?
Yeah.
I mean, clothing, paint colors,
Maybe video games
you know,
too.
video games, you know, all that. So yeah.
Do you know what I recently
Probably
found
is.
out that because we're children of the 90s, what I recently found out is the 1995 or 1996 BMW M3, okay, those two doors M3s have, and the 1997 Acura Integras, again, that's what I grew up on, they are now officially registered as vintage cars.
Really?
Vintage.
How sad is that?
Okay, so I read something the other day too. It's like
1997.
like right now we're closer to 2062, which is when the Jetsons were happening, than in 1962 when they were playing 2062.
We're closer to
yeah,
that.
Yeah, we're closer to the
Wow.
2062 now. I was like, okay, that stinks.
That's
We
kind
were
of,
watching Blade Runner the other day, like the new one, and it's like set in 2024.
Wait a minute.
Like, that's not.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
not that far away.
I was listening to the stand-up comedian yesterday, and he was doing this comedy bit about the future. Imagine talking to people in the future, and people are like, "Whoa, 2022 or 2021! Like, I bet you guys got like flying cars." No, we didn't get those, but we got a bunch of scooters. They're everywhere. Like, what's so cool about them? Well, like, you're not responsible for it. You can just leave it anywhere you want.
They're everywhere.
Really? That's where we advance? That's a
I feel like I see way less of them though. I only see like one or two every once in a while on the corner of
it's
somewhere.
so sad. Or they're just
They're
off
not
to the
around.
side of the road,
Yeah.
just on their side.
Yeah, on their side.
Like, it's always.
They're empty of batteries.
Nobody's taking care of them.
I wonder if bigger
Absolutely.
cities still have them because
Oh,
I feel like
100%. Oh,
here
100%.
they're gone.
Well, it's like here, like public transportation, metros, and all that stuff. It's not
That's
really that
true.
big,
It's not a thing.
you know.
People
Like
yeah, where are you gonna go?
Uber's twice expensive, you know, just to go 6 miles.
You go 2 blocks.
What's also interesting about your operation of operating Woodcraft is you employ family, like a lot of family.
Yeah.
Like all of your kids, I think, work there.
Yeah,
Almost.
yeah. So they've all like kind of been required to work there. Of course, you know they don't have a choice. You know, the matter.
Was there until a certain age?
No, it's just like that's just what you do. You work for the family business. You know, and
That's such a mobster approach.
I know. I was just like kind of trailing off there a little bit, but it was lots of fun. And so one of the things that I wanted to accomplish with Woodcraft was like sleeping in my own bed every night. Because remember, I was traveling a ton. What I didn't expect is I didn't get to expect that I would have such a joy like work with my kids, you know, work with my family, which was pretty fun. You know, we would talk business, we would talk Minecraft, we'd talk whatever, and it was just cool, just kind of hanging around, with them at the store. And of course, they would learn things that they'd never learn otherwise, and they learned at a velocity that that was great too. So I've got 2 boys that are working there right now. My third and my fourth, my first and my second are actually auditors with an accounting firm. Here in town, and so they left me, but that's okay because they got like real jobs. And I still love them. But it's been really cool. So and then my father-in-law works there too. And then of course
your daughter-in-law works there too, right?
My daughter-in-law does our social media, and she does a lot of our event planning and things like that too. And
That's awesome.
Super fun.
Is there any like hairy parts of having so many of your kids involved?
Hairy?
In it, right?
Yeah. So like when my kids are tardy or late to work, I can't get anybody in trouble. Do you know what I mean? Because if one of my boys is like 5 minutes late, I can't go tell somebody else they're late. They're like,
can't write them up.
You can't write them up, and you can have them not eat, but that's not fair,
Right.
So what do you do? How do you handle it? Because that really bothers me.
You're like, hey, can you help me out a little bit? Come on,
okay.
we're you're leaders, you're examples, and they're like blah 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 blah.
Yeah. Okay, next time.
But everybody goes through that transition. I mean, I did when I was a teenager too. I didn't really care about the things that I had right in front of me, and
I used to have
eventually you do.
I used to have this fear as a kid that of always, because school came so hard for me, I always had this fear of like always being behind on things. Like I got only like C's, right? B's and C's, like low B's and like low C's. But because how difficult it was to me, the idea of missing a day of school because you're sick or being late to school put me in this like weird mind perspective of like you're behind, you're the last one anywhere. And that always terrified me. So like I remember my first job when I was like 16, I worked as a food server at a retirement home, and I would get there like 15, 20 minutes early and just sit outside
in your car
because I was always afraid to be late.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that came from and where the disconnect with the different generation.
Yeah.
Why do that?
I think everybody's built just a little bit different, and they just, sometimes they grow in quicker ways in some ways, and sometimes a little slower in the others,
Right.
Because I was, certainly not the business guy that I am back when I was 18 years old either,
Right.
It was just a different
It'll be
deal.
interesting to see our kids.
Your deal, the way you explain yourself, I mean, that's just like, the makings of an entrepreneur, you're just paranoid enough to where you're going to
like
fail or be late.
Yeah.
So it's like, I got to go after this next deal.
You're probably like on time when you were like 8.
My mom did say that, and this is not to toot my own horn, but my mom did say that when I was 7 years old. I moved to the United States when I was 7. So between 6 and 7, probably our last winter there, when we would all run into the house after playing outside in the snow, and all the kids just run in, I would stay behind and fold my jacket and
put
like
your
place
shoes,
it and
like,
put my
nicely.
shoes.
So
but I
it
was
definitely
never,
like is ingrained in you, like to be that way.
That's awesome.
Well, but the problem is there's things that come with it, right? So like there's people who grew up and they're like, well, I never made my bed. I was okay about, if you're still within that 3 to 6 minutes of showing up to what you're supposed to be at, you're still on time, right? Like even if it's past that. That was fine, but like to me,
it would bother you.
It bothered me so much, but nobody taught me that.
Yeah.
But there's a level of dissatisfaction with yourself that you have to carry. So it's not like there's people out there who sleep fine, and there's people like myself who, like, I've shared this publicly many times. Like, there's this first 10 minutes in the morning when I'm brushing my teeth at like 5:30 in the morning. I'm very unhappy with myself. I'm not proud of anything I do. I'm always like thinking about, why did I have that dessert last night? I always think about, how come I didn't work out that day before? I'd always think about, like, how come I'm not working harder? And so there's this level of like just not liking yourself as much as other people might like themselves.
I do
like
that 12.
Expectations are so
I do
high.
that like 8 hours earlier. It's at
Do you?
night. I think like the day.
She does that
I
at
do that at
night.
night
Really?
too.
Yeah,
Yep.
the
I'm
night
laying
before.
in bed.
You're just going, oh man, I didn't do that.
Yeah,
Oh,
why
I
didn't
shouldn't
I
have
do
said
that?
that.
Yeah.
That was really weird,
Yeah.
And then the next morning you're like, hey, all right, let's go.
I'm the same. I wake up in the morning, I feel great. I get my cup of coffee. I'm like, I'm a good mom. I'm a good wife. And then I lay in bed at night and I'm like, oh man, I feel so guilty. Why did I yell at my kids? Why did I do this?
Yeah. That's
Totally, I
hilarious.
get out of
Yeah,
that.
no, I mean, and some people might. I think one of our friends were like talking to us, like, yeah, I think I'd rather
I think
have.
you're the 1% that does it in the morning, and not a lot of people do that.
And it's such a short period of time. It's like by the time I'm done brushing my teeth and I get out of the room, like, we're fine. So just brush your teeth.
Like your brain is still waking
get
up.
over it. Just go on with the day.
Yeah.
That can happen.
How? So it's interesting to me. So at 33, 34, you purchase into this franchise, which you have to. The amount of life savings you have to put towards that,
Sure.
it's a huge risk. It's essentially like gambling at a casino.
It's all your eggs in one basket.
It's all your eggs in one, exactly. But now you bought into this thing, and you know it's a moving, grooving machine. But now you have to teach yourself business, because that's like one thing. I remember I was working at Wells Fargo when I was like 22 or something like that as a personal banker, and I saw a lot of what are they called? A doctor who has his own little private practice, guys that'll come in, little clinics. And they might have been good doctors, but they're not good at running a business.
Yeah.
And so you see a really low success rate. So how did you decide to learn business?
So that's the hard part about the kind of the Woodcraft thing, like that advertisement, make your hobby your career. I mean, that's not true.
No.
You've got a lot of people that are really good at woodworking that are just not going to, do a lick in business. And that it can be real disappointing, because you say, wait a minute, I'm not going to be able to make my hobby my career.
Yeah.
I had the benefit of spending a lot of time at Costco, and spent time with, a lot of different areas at the company corporately, and then in the warehouses and everything. And so what it taught me was really how to run stuff and critical paths and what's really important, and prioritizing and teaching people and bringing them along in the process and communicating and things like that, which was just a huge thing, shot in the arm when we took over Woodcraft. Woodcraft is already operating in Boise too, and so I'm taking all of my credit away, right, of being a really successful guy. The business was already open, and so I didn't have the stress of taking it from $0 to whatever
Right.
break even was, or whatever a growth year, or whatever financial benchmarks that you have for yourself. So I didn't have to go through all that stress. My stress was more like, hey, what major tweaks do we need to make? And that was a little bit easier than starting something from scratch.
The ground,
You know, and since then we've done that, but at the same time though, you know, that would be, you know, having all your eggs in one basket, plus you don't have a lot of, you know, cash to kind of put forward in it. So we were in a really good spot, you know, to do it. I had a lot of experience at a great company.
Were you in leadership position when you were at Costco?
Yep,
you were.
Yep,
okay.
Yep. And, you know, so just it was a great jumping off point, you know, and, you know, so, I mean, we went, you know, from a, you know, really, really great corporate job to one where it was like, okay, so we're going to buy our own insurance. We're going to, you know, open the doors every day, close the doors every day. And, you know.
Now, you knew how to captain a ship or a group of people because from your previous experience. But what about, like, do they give you any kind of, like, here's a 2-week shadow us, like, this is how you pay your electrical bill here. This is how, when you know when you need to order a low supplies.
No, not really. I mean, you do it because you're responsible. I mean, it's the same reason why you just
research.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I love saying that, you know, when you're in a position, you know, of responsibility, you know, failure is not an option. And so when you say failure is not an option, it's like you kind of have to believe it too. You have to say, okay, I'm going to push through this brick wall a little bit harder because I don't have time to hit it twice, you know? And so you just kind of go forward that, you know, with that mentality. And, you know, when the bill comes due and you're like, oh, I forgot about that. Well, next time you learn and you don't, you know, you
won't forget next time.
Yeah. You don't pay it late, you know, and, you know, and then there's a couple things that you just, you know, like, you know, one of our things is, man, if I ever make a mistake on payroll, talk about waking up at 5:30 in the morning, brushing my teeth and hating myself.
Yeah.
That's for a week. You know, you do that, you know, because you're like, oh my gosh, these people are like relying upon you. You totally failed them. You're so terrible, you know, and I really do take it seriously. But, you know, there's other things too that, you know, lessons are easy to come by. And, you know, as long as you're willing to learn, you know, from them, it's fine.
So there's not a lick of like, hey, like you, just how to run Woodcraft itself. You get nothing of that. You don't get like, who's my supplier.
Yeah,
you do.
You get some of the nuts and bolts, you know. I mean, you get the, you know, the phone numbers, the phone book. You get some processes, you know, when you receive a shipment in the back door, here's how you process it. You know, here's how you know,
you get that part.
You get that part. But, you know,
Not
a lot
so
of
much like the accounting side.
Yeah. The accounting, you know, not so much, you know, fortunately I had some, you know, some background in finance at Costco, which helped out a bunch, but, not a whole lot of that, but you just kind of figure it out, I guess.
I love what you said about when you're in position of leadership, like the failure is not an option, because I like the perspective I always put on is like not having a plan B, because if you have a plan B, that's when people are like, I could just fall back on it. Like I can keep my respiratory therapy degree. I can always fall back on that. But if you don't have it, then that's, by burning that bridge, you're forcing yourself to outwork the next person. Yeah. You're like, I don't have anywhere to go.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I kind of take a look at the same way. And, you know, your plan B has got to be so bad that you're not even willing to do it. You know, you're not even willing to accept it, you know, and that's just another motivation for it. And, you know, I remember somebody else saying one time too, is like, you know, if you're average, you know, you got competition everywhere. If you're exceptional, the competition kind of starts wearing away. And I'm like, okay, I get it now, you know, so, you know, let's try to push a little bit harder. Let's strive a little bit more. And of course, you know, want to make sure you're not like just striving for striving's sake, you know, that you actually have a purpose, you know, a purpose behind it too. But, there's nothing wrong with working hard.
I love that the perspective that if you're exceptional, then competition kind of wears itself kind of down. Is there something that, what's interesting about not specifically only woodcraft, but like that, like a fine woodworking industry or just woodworking period. What's cool is there's a lot of young people that are getting into it, right? It's kind of like resurfacing again. But then there's also like this huge generation of like salt and pepper hair, right? That have been turning lathes and all that stuff. Is there a specific approach you're taking for like the future of how to be more attractive to the younger population, the next generation of people?
I think there's something innate, you know, there's nothing special about woodworking. However, working with your hands, I think is something that is just real, you know. And when you know, a lot of the younger folks I see, you know, they have great jobs or, you know, successful careers, you know, and sometimes they might be missing something because they're just sitting in front of a computer, all day long, and they want to just do something. And so scratching that itch when it happens. And so, having a project that is easy enough to get somebody over that hump. You want to make that that barrier to entry very, very low, so that people can kind of come in, have some success, and go, wow, that was cool. I'm going to make one. I'm going to make another one, And so you try to come up with projects. And, social media has really done everybody a favor in woodworking, because they've shown that people can build tables. Yeah. You get a big piece of wood, you sand it down, you put a stain on it and get some hairpin legs, and now you're a woodworker. Yeah. Absolutely, you're a woodworker. Are you doing your own joints and figuring out how to work hand tools? I don't even know how to do that really that well. Yeah. But you just get people in, and then of course the cool part too is that kind of that older generation really kind of wants to actually share their knowledge too. Mm-hmm. And if you can get these two groups of folks together, it's kind of sweet. Yeah. Actually, you get a lot of people sharing their stories, and a lot of people really listening because they really want to do something with their hands. Yeah.
There's like a mentorship that almost happens.
It kind of is, and if you can kind of garner that would be, man, you'd probably do really well.
Mm-hmm. Especially the guys out there who are didn't have a good relationship with their grandfather, and here's a guy that's old enough to be your grandfather, be here, you want to use this and not that, and you're like, I love you.
I know. It's like Florence Nightingale kind of feel there. Yeah, it is. It really is.
Are you guys seeing a shortage in supplies? Because,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Me being in the design field, anything I want to order, any furniture, it's so back ordered, and then I'm hearing there's a foam shortage, there's a paint shortage. Are you guys feeling that?
Yeah.
There's a shortage. Recently, I just found out there's a chicken wing shortage.
Chicken wing shortage.
A chicken wing, and I found that out the hard way. I've heard about it, and then I ordered some Buffalo Wild Wings, and then they gave me some of the most driest, dehydrated.
Probably
Thank
old.
goodness there's a chicken wing shortage, because I don't know how to eat them.
You don't know how to eat them?
No, I don't know how to eat them. I've seen people put them in their mouth, the whole thing, and then pull it out. Yep. And I'm like, that's cool.
Oh, but the bone in.
Yeah, I don't want to.
So I just get boneless.
I'm just my fingers are all over. I just decimate it.
But. Yeah. No, there's a science to it. So if it's the wing, you put that in, you pull it out, and then usually between the two bones of the wings, you'll have a little bit, so you break it apart and eat it. But I think the real magic starts happening, and I think we're going to devote an entire episode just to how to eat chicken wings. But the real magic happens is when you get into a little bit of that bone marrow or a little bit of that tendon. That's the best part.
It's a crunchy.
It's a texture. Yeah. You get the right amount of sauce on it. It's perfect.
It's way too much work.
It's a lot of work.
I know.
It's
That's
messy.
why I get the boneless. It's just so easy. You eat it with a fork.
There's not a shortage on those, right?
No, but here's the problem with the boneless. Unless it's the real thing where they char it. It's not.
The boneless ones are just chicken breast, right?
It's a McNugget. It's a good sauce in it, right?
It's this paste that they put on and then just deep fry it.
Yep.
But yeah, we've seen a lot of a shortage of stuff. I mean, it is it's happened in certain waves. There's the waves of the pandemic. You'll have kind of that initial wave where everybody ran out of stuff because China was shut down.
Yeah, nothing was coming in.
Nothing was coming in. Nothing was being made, that we were consuming, And then, they opened up and then we were shut down. So then demand increased. And so, they took up all that demand. And so we ran out again. And so you've had to be a little bit creative, with how you get that and what you get too. And for the most part, people are generally, pretty okay with it. Mm-hmm. We'll have a customer come in the store and say, hey, do you have this thing? And I'm like, man, no, I don't think we do. Let me see if the vendor has it. And so, I go to their website, give them a call and no, we're out of these. And the customer will confess, yeah, I knew that. I just wanted to see if you guys had it.
I knew that
And
already.
So it's these desperate pleas. Yeah. It's all of a sudden you're like, hey, we're in the same foxhole here.
Yeah.
We
Are the majority of your customers, would you say, are hobbyists, or do you attract a huge population of carpenters?
It's a little of both. It's a little bit of both. There's a lot of people that are in the remodel business that are clients of ours, and then a lot of hobbyists and students and people who are just recently retired. This is just all kinds.
Yeah,
you're interesting because from this conversation that we've had, you have such a positive outlook on a lot of these things that you don't seem like you could be stressed for a guy who's running a business.
Yeah, those things do stress you out, but at the same time, and of course I share all this stuff with my family, so they're like, wow, Dad, you're really optimistic. You're usually not that way, but you kind of sit back at the end of the day and you go, okay, what's the real important deal?
Right.
Yeah. the important deal is just like, you're provided for, and, you got a great family, and, lots of friends and stuff. And so everybody's safe. And
that's a great perspective.
You're doing okay.
Yeah, that's a great perspective.
And we've got a great great group of people at Woodcraft, which is super fun.
Right.
Yeah, there's still a lot to be thankful for.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell me, what's it like being a grandfather for the first time?
So it's hard to, it's hard to communicate because I'm still so new at it. She's only 5 months old. But,
I'm sorry, I need it in weeks. That's the only way I understand gestation.
My Jonah, my second boy, he's in years. He's like, you're 0, okay? You're not 1 until you're 12 months old. You're 0.
You're 0.
You don't even round, okay? It's not even half birthdays.
He's not wrong.
He's not wrong.
It's like my kids when you try to explain months. Yeah, it's the same thing. I'm like, Becca would be like, how old is Harper? Well, she's 6 months. Is she 0 or 1?
Yeah,
like,
but Beckham doesn't know what 30 minutes is or 6 minutes.
That's what I'm saying. It's like it's hard to explain to a kid what months are.
Yeah.
You just say 0 or 1. She's still 0.
How many sleeps is that? Okay.
Okay.
And finally, when she turned 1, it was like, okay, they can finally say she's 1.
You're right. I know, right? But I'm 9.5.
At what age do we as adults stop counting half ages?
I want to say when you're like 16.
Probably.
Yeah.
What do you think so?
Yeah, I mean, even then it feels a little bit too much up there. You know what I mean? Like, you can't be like, just got keys and be like, how old are you? 16 and a half. Okay, bud.
You're going to need to come up with something else.
Well, I feel like also as I get older, I want to hold on to the age as long as possible. So my birthday could be tomorrow, but I'm still only 32.
Oh, you're doing that.
Yes, the opposite.
No, that's very, very
I
true.
like forgetting how old I am and then be like, because when you're not thinking about it and you don't care about it,
forget. I remember my parents doing this, going like, oh, I don't remember. Am I turning this or this? I'm like, how could you not know how old you're turning? And then it happened to me, and I'm like,
really?
Am I turning 32 or 33?
Well, like after 30, you shouldn't care. You're like, if I want something, I'll go get it. Like if and you start doing this thing where it's like, I think the first sign of maturity where you're like, can we just go do something and I can remember this memory? You know what I mean? That's the best gift. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it does. It stops mattering as much when you're like, I'm 13 and a half.
So she's 5 months old.
She's 5 months old, and being a grandparent is pretty cool. The first feeling you have is it's like, okay, well, this baby's like kind of like mine. I mean, we've had 5 kids, so this is just like another baby. We just had to wait a little bit longer, and it's not. They go home, and I kind of don't want them to. I don't want her to. Yeah. But I would say probably the biggest joy that I have about being a grandparent is watching my son and my daughter-in-law like nurture this little baby. It's just so sweet to see, them, kind of spread their wings and do things that I've never seen him do before.
Is this your oldest?
This is my oldest. Yeah. And, watching him, baby talk, and I mean, it's hilarious. I love it. And it's so cute. So that's probably
a whole different side of them probably comes out.
It is.
Especially for a male.
Yeah. It's so fun. And it's just, it's pretty cool. She's pretty cute too.
Do you find yourself having to, cause I'm always like, sometimes thinking about like when my kids have their own kids, do you find yourself, because I see what my parents do and they try to like, mostly my mom, she's like, it's a good thing that we don't live close. They're in Seattle, we're here, so the 500 miles apart. It's helpful then when they come over, they're kind of like, what are the boundaries? And they're like, we'll spoil them over here and then we leave and then you guys can go back to it. We'll try to make sure they're still good listeners. But I'm sure if we lived closer to each other, like my mom would have more input on like, hey, don't do this, do that. I've heard that. I've heard, my mom just lives with fear. And so I can imagine that fear. Do you find yourself having to pump the brakes on like, okay, I shouldn't be that, I don't know if intrusive is the word. I think like opinionated about sharing that.
Yeah, you definitely want to, keep in mind that this isn't your child. This is theirs, and so your experience is different than theirs. And you don't want to wear your welcome out. You know what I mean? And so, you just bite your tongue a little bit. I mean, not that you have to. I mean, she's only 5 months old. It's not like she's really, really going crazy. Because
I'm thinking like discipline. Where do you draw the line there? And
I don't know how we'll do. I don't know. Maybe I won't be so chill. I'll be a little bit more stressed out.
That's where the stress comes in.
You have all boys, or do you have a daughter as well?
I have a daughter as well. She's the youngest. Yeah.
She's how old is she?
She is a sophomore. Yeah.
Sophomore. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have experience about raising girls.
I have zero experience raising girls. She's the only one.
She's the only one.
Yeah. You got the second one.
A girl. You have experience raising a girl. We'll see how she turns out when she gets 18.
There's just
I'll let
one.
you know. No, she's so sweet. she's a rose among thorns. I mean, having all 4 brothers is
right.
Is,
She's
is
gotta
a challenge.
keep up,
Do you feel like she kept you younger? Being your youngest?
Yeah, I think so. Her birthday's 2 days away from mine. So speaking about birthdays, I always mine were in the shadow of hers, which I was completely fine with.
Right.
We're always going to celebrate her birthday.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is awesome.
It was funny. People always ask me because like we have 2 boys and then we just had our daughter who she's 1, and people would ask me like, what has changed now that you have a daughter? And I always tell them like, I don't think anything specifically changed with me right now that I have a daughter. But I did notice that having the third time around, like we first got pregnant when I was 25, right? Or we had Jack when I was 25.
I was 24.
And we were like living. Me and her got married. He was born within like the first year of our marriage, and I just graduated college, didn't get a job yet in that field.
We were both in college still.
We were living off of like between like me, you, and Jack off of like $1,200 a month, right? Like having $200 in savings was incredible. It was a miracle. And so the stress of everything was like weighing down on you, right? Yeah. You're trying to navigate how to be a parent. You're trying to figure out how to pay your bills on time and have some money to like not get kicked out by your landlords. And then the second kid comes around, you take yourself a little bit less seriously. You try to say yes more often, right?
Well, I think with the first, you like try to be the perfect parent. You read all the books. You're like, well, the book told me to do this. And then by the second you realize, well, there's a lot of like gray area. There's a lot of learning as you go. Yeah. And then with the third. Yeah.
And then with the third now, it was like, well, I noticed this transition from like second to third. First, like, before we had her, it was like she would be out with like a girls' night at a book club or something like that, and the boys would be like, hey, mom's not here, can we go ride our bikes at nighttime before bed to the gas station, get candy bars and ride back? And so much of you wants to say no just because of convenience.
And you're tired.
But then you go, if I say yes, they're not going to grow up to do meth because I said we can go get candy.
We used to
at
have
9 o'clock p.m.
We used to have a tradition in our family with just the boys when mom would leave town. It was called Boys Weekend.
Yeah.
And, no girls allowed. You could wear whatever you want. You didn't have to shower. You could pretty much eat
my kids
flushing is optional.
The boys would love that.
And it was really fun. I mean, the actual event wasn't as cool as the name and the hope and the anticipation of the event, And I remember it was kind of sad actually when my wife came home one time. There was a sign on the door that says, like, no girls allowed. She's like, what? Don't you guys love your mom? And of course they do. But that was a fun. Those were fun. Those were fun times. So you can do it, boys
night.
Yeah,
they do boys night.
We would do a boys night, and it's like they get to pick an activity and where we go get dinner, right? So it's like we'll go to a restaurant, we'll sit down, and then they'll do a hot tub or ride bikes or whatever the thing is. But then Harper was born. And I told the boys, I was like, we can't call it a boys' night because like we have to be inclusive of her.
If I'm gone,
yeah. And so we started calling it daddy dates and stuff like that. Yeah. But I did notice that like with Harper, maybe because like whatever I tried building up finally got afloat and it's doing its thing and it's operating, right? Kind of like Woodcraft. You bought it at 33. Yeah. Between 33 and how old are you now?
52.
52 and a half, right? Yep. To 52, like you finally got it afloat. You're like, okay, this is a living, breathing machine. I just have to feed it. And then, you know what I mean? And then like, you're not as stressed out anymore. And that's what the place I finally got to, that now I find myself like slowing down, not slowing down production or creating or ideas. That's ramping up even more, but I'm slowing down and taking it in. Like I remember yesterday, you and Harper were taken off to the store, something like that, and she's all dressed up and she's got her shoes. Harper, not you. She's got dressed up and have her shoes, and she's sitting in her little kid chair and she's holding her bunny, and the sun was just like hitting her just right with this almost like this picturesque kind of scenario. And I was just like, I told myself to like stop and just take it in for a second because I just wanted to remember her. Like this is the last kid we're having. This is my first daughter. And so I just found myself to just stopping and smelling the roses more often.
Yep. You treasure those moments, and you do even more the older they get. You do. Whenever our whole family's together, I'm at that point where it's like, okay, wow, the times that all my 5 kids and grandbaby, daughters-in-law, whatever, but going to be in one space. It doesn't happen very much. So you sit back and you just kind of go, wow, this is cool.
Soak it in.
Yeah. Do you find yourself crying more? Because I've cried now more than I ever did before.
I think I started out that way. I'm a crier. You can tell me some sad story and I'll start weeping. I
didn't cry before at all. And then
you did not. I feel like the first, I only saw you cry probably like a few times in our first like 8 years of marriage. So all of a sudden,
Super Bowl. No, I'm kidding. But then like I started like, I don't know, something about my kids and like a legacy of, and then just like they're only little for this short period of time. And I didn't have the greatest relationship with my father. So like to be able to like stop the buck and like have these kind of, you know, build their confidence and, you know, seeing them learn and be excited about their learning. That like she made me this last Father's Day. She's really good about taking little videos on her phone and saving to the cloud. So she did a little compilation of like, it was like a 6-minute video or 12-minute video of like all these like moments where like whether we're dirt biking, whatever. And I was watching on the couch this last Father's Day, and I came to the bedroom when she was like, and I was like bawling like a child for like 30 minutes.
Happy tears.
Because I was telling her everything comes down, whether it's tattoos that I have or whatever, it's like everything comes down to something that's important to you that like I always look back into like because I worked in the ICU and I've been part of in putting people on ventilators and taking them off, whether it's them getting better or them going on life support and then, you know, just letting them expire. You're constantly around life and death.
Yeah.
And there's some people who made certain choices. Other people are just different life cycles and acceptance of things that I always go back to is like, okay, your life comes down to the day you're going to be on your deathbed. And what you think about that time is it's gonna be huge. And so to me, what she put on those video clips was something that I wanted to watch or think of when I'm hopefully old and dying on my deathbed. But I wanted to think of but she allowed for me to experience those memories at 33.
Yeah, it was like your life going before your eyes, and you're like, wow, this is awesome. I get to actually enjoy it too.
And it was incredible because like all this times that you do think you're like, oh, am I not spending enough time with them? I'm not being
guilt that creeps up.
And you see those clips and you go, oh wow, they're constantly around me. They're constantly around my leg. Whether like there's one clip where I'm teaching my oldest boy how to take down a bully, you know, and Beckham is the prop, and I'm catching him behind, or we're riding dirt bikes and they're pulling up behind me. I'm like, wow, like. We have done some things, huh? This is a good life, huh?
Yeah, it's pretty great, and kids just reflect it too, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So, what is next for Woodcraft?
So you know, Woodcraft is just clicking right along. You know, we need to keep it fresh. You know, we need to keep changing things. We need to, you know, keep growing and innovating, and we'll continue to do that. We've got a new chapter starting up here pretty soon, which is we're going to build a makerspace in a different location. It'll be like woodworking centric, and the idea behind it is to have a space where you can kind of create and, you know, nurture that community of woodworking people. And you know, some woodworking people don't have all the tools. Some woodworking people have some tools but not, you know, the tools they really want, you know. Some woodworking people have a project that's going to be really intensive on their little tiny tool in their garage. They'd like to have something a little bit more industrial to work on. And so what we wanted to do is create a space that we could, you know, just invite people to come in and you know, and pay to be part of, and see what happens, you know. So that'll be kind of the next chapter for us in 2022. You know, we've got to find a location. We've got to, you know, figure out how we're going to do the layout. We've got to figure out how to do membership, because I mean, arguably it's kind of like a health club for, you know, for woodworking tools, you know. But you know, is it a membership, or is it just like, hey, I just need something today, you know,
like a one-time,
like a one-time deal, or I need a couple hours on this tool, or, you know, I need to borrow the lathe so I can make some Christmas presents, you know, for my kids. I don't have one at home, or you know, I just moved from California and I don't, you know, my house isn't built yet.
Right. Or the people don't have space in their
in their garage or whatever for stuff. And so we got to figure out a lot of those details. But, you know, that's probably what's going to be kind of next for us.
That's exciting. So it's essentially you pay into this membership to come use the tools on hand that are there. Basically use it's like a workshop that you basically rent.
Yeah, exactly. And
great.
So, you know, you'd come in and, you know, you'd get certified on the tools so you know how to use them, you know. And you know, go and have some fun, you know.
Is there a liability as a business owner behind that? I mean, you have your general liability, but like, what's to cover you from somebody cutting their finger off?
You know, there's only one tool in the shop that, you know, helps you from cutting your finger off, and that's that, you know, saw stop table saw, right? All the others are, you know, just inherently dangerous. And so, yeah, I think you have to, just make sure that you're covered, insurance and, liability wise, make sure that you're not doing the wrong thing or teaching the wrong thing or, being negligent in any way. But, it's a dangerous sport, but yeah, you cover yourself as much as possible, and then you just, hope for the best,
What do you, and we'll wrap it up with this. One of the most popular questions I always get is people going DMing me saying, I'm trying to get into woodworking or building. What are the top, 3 to 5 tools do you think I need to get?
Yeah.
And I have my answer. I want to hear what your answer is when people ask you that.
I think the top tool that you need to get is a table saw.
That's your first one.
That's my first one.
I agree
there are
with that.
so many things that you can do with a table saw. You can cut, long skinny boards thinner. You can cut them in half. You can cut them at angles. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. With a table saw. It's kind of the center point, of your shop. Probably next is some way, and it's maybe not a tool, but maybe a method, some way to put those sticks together.
Like glue, is that true? Or
joinery, yeah.
Okay.
Clamps or screws or pocket holes or, something to put those things together. And then probably a sander, of some sort that can get, get it a little smoother for stain or whatever you're doing. And I want to say that that's probably the 3 things, because with those 3 things you can start. You can get 82% there,
Interesting.
And then, a joiner and a planer, both of those things do very, very similar things, and they're always separate tools. So those are like a tie for 4th place.
And those are 2 very intimidating things I remember for myself at least, right?
Yeah.
To if you don't, because there's a learning curve for using a joiner.
There is, and it does one thing.
Yeah.
But it does it really well.
And it's very expensive to do just one thing.
It's very expensive. And that's the thing. That's why it's tied for 4th, because, both of them just do one thing. But they just do it so well.
They really help.
Yeah, they really help, But I would say get your, drill presses. If you have a hand drill, you can kind of, get away with, without a drill press too. But I'd say your table saw is probably best, and some way to put stuff together and then sanding your project.
It's interesting. I find myself that a lot of people jump into like a miter saw first, which I completely agree with you about a table saw first.
Yeah, that'd probably be up there too. Because it's hard to take a 10-foot long board across your table saw.
Yeah.
As opposed to just laying it on your chop saw. Yeah, chop saw. I'd probably hit my chop saw pretty frequently too. Let me revise that. What my client meant to say was the chop saw is number 1. And then I think your chop saw is probably up there for a bit. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
What are the 3 you always say?
Yeah, what are yours?
Well, I agreed with you very much so on the table saw being the first one for those exact reasons. And I always articulated as like it's the kitchen island of your kitchen. It's like that's where everybody's around. That's where you're doing the majority of your stuff. After that, I don't remember how I had an order, but I definitely had joiner thickness planer and joiner dead last, just because you can avoid buying rough sawn lumber, right? You can still go get stuff that's for the cost of an arm and leg that's already milled up at Home Depot or whatnot. Not to mention plywood, but I think I had table saw and then a drill, right, to run your pocket screws. I think I've learned that, at least that way, is she bought me my first Craig pocket hole jig when like 7 years ago or something.
It's Christmas present.
And that allowed for me to actually start putting furniture together. So I would say a table saw, an impact driver, and a Craig pocket hole jig. Yeah. And once you get those 3, I think you can build cabinets and everything else out there.
Yeah. No, I think you're right on.
I did find out though, and this is from I guess because everybody has a different style of building. I did find out that I had a radial drill press, and I didn't have room for it, but also I didn't find myself using it as often. Yeah. And then what's another tool I had to give off? I forgot. I think there's like one more that I was like, it's helpful, but it's like I use it so limited, and I don't have the space for it. And that's the thing, was that a lot of people have that problem.
Yeah, and that's a toughie. Space, that's a toughie. Which actually this like makerspace would be great.
Yeah,
because you can use it to complement your your workshop. When you like don't have something like that, because that's always a challenge. Is because we'll get asked that question quite a bit. Is like, okay, where do I start? And again, I do the planer and joiner last, because at Woodcraft we'll dress your your rough lumber so you don't have to. Yeah. And do it for for pretty inexpensively. So that table saw is really the big deal.
So you guys offer that service where you'll mill the people's lumber. That's really awesome.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an awesome deal. Okay, well, Monte, thank you so much for joining us here. Where could people find you, or if they want to get more information about whatever you guys are doing?
So we are on Instagram, Woodcraft Boise. We're on Facebook, Woodcraft of Boise. And find us there, or find us in Boise, Idaho. Come to the store. Yeah.
And you'll definitely see Monte because his office is right by the front door.
Right by the front door. Yeah. I'm gonna
yell for him.
Playing Minecraft in the office there.
Improve pixelation.
I'm gonna be trying to come up with a new update.
All right, Monte, we appreciate you stopping by. Make sure you guys go check him out. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.